I guess it's almost time to get going. What's that statement in the scriptures? The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Anyway, lots to discuss. For the top news, as they say, there's nothing sacred. These apps reserve the right to sell your prayers. For technology, apparently, the nanotechnology revolution is here, but we just haven't noticed. In environment, and I know Norman often thinks this, climate and health impacts of natural gas stoves are much greater than previously thought.
That's for you, Norman.
In materials, a zeolite nanotube discovery. We'll have to find out what's that about. In flight and space, astronomy, the Webb Telescope has reached its final destination, and it's about 1 million miles from Earth. In biology, there's a lot of altruism throughout biology towards offspring. A study reveals details in single-celled algae, diatoms, in their altruism towards their offspring. Single-celled algae do that. In finance, Bitcoin is down, really, really bad. And in health, medicine, and so on, laparoscopic surgery without human help is now here. A robot performs laparoscopic surgery. So, Richard, that's what we'll talk about. And what's this in our top story, that there's nothing sacred? These apps reserve the right to sell your prayers.
Well, we have been suspicious of social media for a while, and this story shows us that our suspicions are well versed. And let me first start with a story of Katie and the worst year in Katie's life. This was when her 24-year-old son went missing, and 7 weeks later, police recovered his body from a river that goes through the town. And she had to cross that river every day over a bridge where his body was found. And it was hard on Katie. And to grieve, she turned to prayer apps. First, she went to one that is now defunct, InstaPray, and then went to pray.org, or pray.com, excuse me. And she says, thanks to pray.com, Katie found solace in a community of what she called prayer warriors, who are thousands of people who share their deepest fears and hopes in a public Facebook-like feed of prayers and prayer requests. And it turns out, as she was dishing out her spiritual anguish, pray.com was data mining by matching her actions to details about her that it had purchased from data brokers to enrich the data that they had available to sell. And of course, pray.com collects data from its users in multiple ways, and then it supplements that data by buying enrichment data from third parties such as data analytics and data brokers. And of course, they have users sign some agreement on policy when they join the free app, but nobody reads them. And she didn't read them. The policy says pray.com, shares users' personal information with third parties for commercial purposes. So I think that means they're selling what they're learning from her praying. And prior to an inquiry from BuzzFeed News, uh, the company made no public mention of its purchasing data from users from other data sources. It's added that now in December, it added that to its end user agreement and admitted what it does. It still declines to say which data breakers it uses and which third parties it shared data with. They know, though, that it shares detailed granular data with several other companies, including Facebook. And what this means is that Facebook users could be targeted with ads based on content that they engage with on pray.com. So I don't know what it's like. If you pray for something, does that mean that soon you'll be getting an ad from Facebook for how to buy it? I don't know, but that's what certainly is implied. Now, lawmakers have expressed concern, like Senator Richard Blumenthal says, quote, this investigation makes even more clear the need for Congress to pass comprehensive consumer privacy laws to ensure the public is in control of their most intimate personal information. And it's common, of course, for free apps to make money by sharing user data and to be vague about how they use it and with whom they use it. But even with that, users feel like Pray.com's data practices are at odds with the deeply personal nature of prayer itself, and that there is an expectation of privacy among people sharing their prayers. And in the background, it turns out uh, people have been turning to these religious apps as a replacement for in person church services during this time of COVID 19. And of course, Silicon Valley investors look at this as a big opportunity to commercialize another set of users and conversations that they couldn't get to any other way. And these are commercializing somehow their most private conversations with God. And there are more companies than just Pray.com. An example of this in going on in the venture capitalist space is now there's a Catholic app called Hallow, and they've raised $40 million from the venture capitalists, and a similar app called Glorify has also raised $40 million. And these are from people like Andreessen and Peter Thiel, who all also heavily invested in Facebook. And Facebook, being aware of this as an market, has recently ramped up its own prayer offering by rolling out a new tool called Prayer Posts. So there, these apps are getting into it in a big way, and now some of the people who talk about this are saying that this is really a part of the long-term attendance collapse in churches around the U.S., and that the church as we know it will be gone in 20 years. So maybe they're just getting ready for the future of God. And the prayer, the pray.com privacy policy, of course, creates a perfect storm to build deeply invasive profiles of religious voters. And, the people feel like they are making private prayers to God, but much of their activity is public, like the woman we're talking about in her pray.com prayer group. Her posts are public to 100,000 other users in that group. And so uh, there is not just Pray.com involved in this. There's another company that I hadn't heard about, Bible Gateway, and it's one of the largest devotional apps on the market. And to make you feel secure, it's owned by Robert Murdoch's News Corporation, and it's been making money by selling its users' information for years. And they have data on 8 million people, and they put it into an ad targeting system they call News IQ. And News IQ claims it can capture the preferences, opinions, and emotions of users for advertisers to exploit. And uh, to show you the opinion of these companies, Pray.com's policies all categorize their users' personal information as a business asset. So now these guys want to sell what they glean from your personal conversation to God to the highest bidder.
Any thoughts?
Well, God is pretty high.
That's right.
Well, isn't that how everybody makes money on the internet?
Yes,
They gather the data and sell it.
yes. And some people have said that's a problem. And that's why people like Senator Blumenthal is now trying to make some kind of laws to protect your privacy. What I've thought for some time is I'm happy for everybody to do that. What I'm unhappy with is they're paying these companies and not me. And I want to have a system where I give them permission and I set a price. And so if you want me, I'm cost this much.
Oh, well.
I agree wholeheartedly.
I don't think we should be surprised. The companies have been doing that for the last 10 years. You go online and look for a lamp, and the first thing you know, there's lamps on the side of your screen for the next 6 months. So
Yes, I know. At my house, my wife has an Alexa, and one of the things that we have been doing within Alexa's earshot is we've been talking about Lamborghinis and see if we would start to get ads from the internet for Lamborghinis.
Nothing happened yet, eh?
So far, we haven't yet.
That's why this application that Murdoch is exploiting is so much better, because after all, when you're talking to God, you have to be honest, right? Honest to God.
That's right. Well, certainly that's part of the problem with the concern about this is that there are people who have thought that their conversation with God are private.
A friend was talking to her daughter. Of all things, the word toilets came up. This is on the phone. And then she started getting ads for toilets.
Okay. Okay.
And this is like 5 years ago.
Okay.
So, technology revolution, how do we know it's here and why haven't we seen it?
Well, this is interesting. I apologize, by the way, on this article. The article turned out to be behind a paywall, and I didn't realize that until this morning. I found other places where I got more complete printouts of the article and am talking from that. And before there was all this talk we have now of a metaverse and things like that, the most hyped thing in technology was nanotechnology. And, nano means a billionth, and basically it refers to materials manipulated at an atomic or a molecular scale. And to tell you how old that was, in the second half of the 80s, I was director of a product line in a semiconductor company. And at that time, we'd been hearing about nano, and what companies do is they make nano things, and we're starting to wonder, hey, there must be something we could make that's nano that would be cool. We didn't find anything, but that was thinking about it now 35 years ago. And, since about 20 years ago, I really hadn't heard much about nano myself. And, but, so things have not unfolded as they thought it would 35 years ago, but the nanotech revolution is actually underway. And to a large degree, you can thank the microchip, because this is the place where they are working already at that scale, developing equipment and processes and fabrication techniques. And this is going to be the basis of a lot of the nanotechnology revolution. And already, things that have benefited from the work they've done already are things like cell phone and radar and inkjet printers and 5G and other wireless technology. And just around the corner from this nanotechnology, one of the things you're going to see next is ultra tiny cameras. You're also going to see cameras with lenses that are flat, that don't bulge out, because they figured out some tricks to play with light where you can make a lens without the curvature. And the other thing that's going to happen from nano soon are an array of many different kinds of sensors able to do things like detect air pollution and black ice, to even skin cancer. So there's lots of sensor technology they are working on. And in a little bit more distant future, the technology might yet enable the vision of physicist Richard Feynman, who, in his 1959 lecture, "There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom," and in this lecture, he hypothesized about a way to build three-dimensional structures, one atom at a time. This was 1959, and now we are actually doing that. And so now these creating real-life nanomachines is capitalizing on the hundreds of billions of dollars invested in perfecting this technology for microchips, and uses the same type of machines, techniques, and fabs as used in these other ones. And one of the places where this is also going to be happening is with graphene, because graphene and other 2D materials are already the subject of intense research trying to develop an alternative to silicon in the microchips of the future. And the future could involve building three-dimensional structures on top of two-dimensional sheets of graphene. The three-dimensional structures would be things like transistors that are the basis for semiconductors. And the semiconductor industry is still working on technologies that can in fact take us to this next level in nano, and they're working now on electron beam technology. They've been using that for semiconductors for at least 40 years, and uh, they are working on it with the end goal to use an electron beam to rapidly remove, add, or modify atoms on a surface, one atom at a time, and in a system that is kind of like 3D printing on the atomic scale. So Nano is alive and well. It's just tiny, so we can't see it.
Any thoughts?
I'm flabbergasted.
How even small thoughts, nano thoughts, come on.
If we want to move on then, why are natural gas stoves so bad?
Well, the short answer is because they use natural gas and they leak. And so natural gas appliances warm the planet by generating carbon dioxide as they burn, and also by leaking unburned methane. And home methane leaks contribute about a third as much warming as does the carbon dioxide generated by combustion. And the stoves also sometimes expose users to respiratory disease with the pollutants that it generates. And now legislators in a number of U.S. Cities and at least one state, New York, are evaluating banning natural gas hookups from new construction. They've already done that in Berkeley, but we know there are a bunch of crazy liberals in Berkeley, so they don't count. And methane's global warming potential is about 86 times as great over a 20-year period and 25 times as great a century after its release than CO2. And methane also threatens air quality by affecting tropospheric ozone, and exposure of this ozone causes an estimated 1 million premature deaths annually worldwide. And it turns out natural gas burning cooking appliances have received comparatively little attention except from Norman. And over one third of U.S. households cook with gas, and are a number of them are exposed to carbon monoxide and nitric acids, which cause respiratory problems. And hood use and ventilation helps, it turns out, but people don't use those hoods very much. Maybe they should use them more. And it turns out more than 3/4 of the methane emissions occurred while the stoves were off, indicating the problem is not the stoves, but essentially leaks and small leaks in gas fittings and connections and stuff like that. That's a problem overall with natural gas, especially in places like the US where it's pumped around in these underground systems, because the underground systems get old and deteriorate and leak. And it's hard to fix an underground leak, it turns out. And then from stoves alone, this new research shows that the estimated total methane emissions from stoves are substantially more than all the emissions that are currently uh, reported by the EPA for residential sources. So just from methane leaks, the EPA numbers for environmental methane from residential stuff is way off. And it turns out you can use electricity, not gas. And I've heard from some in the audience that it works very well, and these new induction cookers are great. So, what do you think?
Any thoughts?
Well, on the subject of methane, as a veterinarian, methane comes from cattle eructions, meaning burping.
Yes,
And methane is really, really bad.
yes. And we need to feed all the cows seaweed.
No,
No?
because we need not, sorry, we need not to eat cows.
Uh-huh. Well, don't have so many cows. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I'm not, what am I saying? I'm not saying that I agree or that I expect people to do that, but that's theoretical.
Sure.
Did they compare it? Is natural gas the same as propane? Was there any comparison?
It's methane, and I don't know what propane. I'm sorry we don't have Andrew. He would be able to tell us.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that the propane heaters used here over the winter. My husband says they just produce water, like they don't produce carbon monoxide. That's why you can use them in the house, whereas you can't use a generator in the house. But I don't know how propane compares to natural gas.
Mhm. Now, come on. Expected, at least from Norman, some kind of statement about how wonderful uh, this is, but I don't know. I don't see him. I don't see him anywhere, and he missed his chance. We're all just waiting for. He's not at his desk. I see that now.
I see it. He's there.
Yeah, he's there.
Okay, he's there, but being quiet. Okay, Norman, we respect your issue, and you don't need to say it because I'm saying it for you.
So then, Richard, if we want to move on to materials, what's this zeolite nanotube discovery?
Well, this is zeolites are crystalline porous materials, and they have, working with them, made usual 3D materials, and now they've made 2D materials, and now they have discovered what they call a 1D material, and they are here calling nanotubes a one-dimensional material, because since they're so skinny, it's almost like they don't have any width, they just have length. And I think they're faking it because they must have some height, but I'm just quibbling, I guess. And they have discovered these zeolite crystals in a nanotubular shape. And this really excites the scientists because they are making fundamental discoveries. And they say, usually nowadays in science, they're doing research that has a predetermined application at the end of it. And they discovered this, and it was pure science. And scientists, it turns out, like doing pure science and discovering stuff. And the zeolite nanotubes have, besides being in a tube structure, they have perforated porous walls because the crystal is porous crystal. And uh, this perforated nanotube is unlike any other kind of nanotube they've seen, so it really is a whole new kind of material. And uh, this they're imagining can be useful in transporting materials around, but they are a different kind of use than a nanotube that is not porous, because here, if you imagine those garden soaker hoses, remember them? You put them out and they spray water everywhere. Well, the nanotube is kind of like that. It's porous in the side. So they think that this will let them do a number of different applications. One is in using membranes to separate materials. Another is in catalysts. Another is in sensing and in energy devices. And so anyway, they've discovered something new in nanomaterials, and it is basically a leaky nanotube. And I can guarantee you that in a while we'll start to hear of clever inventions that have as the basis this leaky nanotube.
Any thoughts?
I was just wondering, Richard, what you're thinking of, what kind of applications can you envision?
Well, again, certainly I can envision use in things like filtration systems to generate clean water and things like that. I can also imagine it would be useful in catalyst systems, because if you had the catalytic particle in a place where the opening was, then you can direct the flow of whatever it is you want to process in a way where it goes right to the catalyst.
Timed release drugs and medicine, probably.
I bet. I hadn't thought of that because it wasn't in the article, and I'm not smart enough to think of these other implications, but you're exactly right. And I can imagine that in a drug delivery system easily.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about new materials, is with new materials, you can do new things. And often if you develop or discover the material, you don't know what it's going to be used for. But if you're discovering it, you say, hey, wow, this is neat. And then some other clever guys figure out how to use it.
Yeah.
So Richard, we've got another story on the Webb Telescope. Apparently it's reached its final destination a million miles away. Tell us a little bit more about this.
Okay, I'm sorry I keep giving you these stories on the web, but I like the web. And, on December 25th, Christmas Day, the Webb launched. And since then, it has unfurled a tennis court size sun shield and unfolded its massive gold mirror that can see to the edge of the universe. And it is now in its orbiting position, which is a million miles out from the Earth, and this is beyond the moon's orbit. And the observatory had its final burn about a week ago and is now into an orbit called the L2. That's a Lagrange point, and that's a stable point, and it is in a place where it protects the telescope from the heat released in the Earth, the Sun, and from the Moon. And it's important that the telescope stays cool because it's observing the universe in the infrared light, and that takes cool to be able to work effectively, so cool that the mirrors have to be kept at a negative 223 degrees C to operate. I think that's pretty cold, and it'll be able to do that because it's in the shadow in the space. And this L2 point is ideal for Webb because the gravitational forces from the sun and the earth are basically evened out there, and it will enable the satellite to stay in the right orbit position without using much fuel. And since there's no refueling missions, it's limited to the fuel it has on board. I think that'll last it about 20 years. And also, this position lets it have an unimpeded view of the universe. Unlike Hubble, I didn't realize with the Hubble moves in and out of the Earth's shadow every 90 minutes. So the Hubble you can only use about half the time. And the position of the Webb also means continuous, stable communication, so it's easier to get data back and forth. And the first images, we will see them this summer. They're finishing up calibrating and stuff like that now. And soon we will have photos.
Any thoughts? Well then, Richard, tell us about altruism. What is it that everybody has altruism to our offspring? Not just us, not just chimps, but single-celled algae? What is it?
Well, I think this is interesting. So this is diatoms, and those are single cell algae, and biologists think of them as an opportunistic organism, and that means that in favorable conditions they will reproduce uncontrollably, or so the biologists thought. Now they have studied them, and these diatoms do what you have to call altruistic behavior, acting for the good of the whole organism. And they have shown that when cells that can mate together meet and are in the right condition to reproduce sexually, only a small portion of the cells takes part in the sexual event, while the rest of the cells actually block their own growth. And this limits their activities and reduces their absorption of nutrients. And this means that the offspring of this sexual union will find their environment richer in nutrients, and that'll favor their growth and the growth of the new generation, favoring the development of the community. They see that this condition also occurs even when there is an abundance of nutrients, so it's just some natural thing of the organism, and it's not driven by the abundance of nutrients, but is driven by that's the way diatoms work. And it's interesting now uh, because what they are able to see is relatively simple organisms are capable of complex behaviors. And there are a lot of questions I would have about that. Uh, I would assume, you have to figure there's something wired into the genetic makeup of the diatoms to do this. The diatoms do not have a nervous system. They don't communicate. How do they know this is going on? So there are a lot of questions I would have about how they do it and why they do it, but it certainly shows that they're capable of behavior that is much more complex than we had imagined.
Any thoughts?
Maybe this is off topic, but of course, the mariposas that show up in Michoacan are the third generation. So they've never been there before. So like, how is that encoded in DNA? That's pretty complex.
Yes, yes, indeed. Well, for me, part of the interest is that my interest in diatoms is because I'm interested in humans and have observed that this altruistic behavior is one of the things that has created the society that we have. And I used to think it was one of humans' secret techniques until, as I read more about it, I find trees do it, diatoms do it. I'm assuming from those two examples that it's a bigger natural phenomena than I ever knew. Now we just need to get Republicans to do it.
Right.
We need
It's
to,
kind of
guess,
like
go ahead, please.
humans used to have dominion over, the plants and the animals, but as science moves forward, we realize that we're much more like them than we thought.
That's right. That's right. I was going to say, as my snide remark, is that having the diatoms take over the Republicans might increase their intelligence. But
I
anyway.
assume at some level, we don't want to consider ourselves just like other animals, because you would never say that a tiger is bad. It's just doing what it normally should. So we want to reserve the right to call Trump bad. Eh?
That's right. Well, I learned with my kids, you say you're not a bad person, you just did a bad thing. I have to evaluate that in light of Trump. What I know is that Trump, just like all the rest of us, is trying to be happy, and it's just he has a god-awful way to do it. A friend of mine who is a martial arts guy once told me, those thugs that you might see in alleys in New York City, they're just trying to find friends. Anyway.
Funny way of doing it.
Yes.
Well, Richard, off of altruism. How about finance? Why is Bitcoin doing so badly?
It's not because of altruism. And, before this, Bitcoin had a good correlation between its value and the stock market. It had greater beta, that it changed faster than the market, but it seemed to kind of be tied to it. But there are other factors in play, like that are happening now. One of which is that Russia has proposed a ban on this crypto mining that they do, and the U.S. Federal Reserve is reluctant to create a digital currency, and China looks like is in the midst of trying to ban these digital currencies, maybe so it can use their own. And with all of this in the background, it looks like Bitcoin has grown out of favor, and it's recently crashed from its high of $60,000 a Bitcoin to it crashed to about 30,000. Now it's up to 38,000, so it's still way low. And the investors are looking for somebody to blame, and so they're blaming Russia and China and the Fed for the crash. It may be because the Bitcoins are imaginary money based on imaginary money, and that's not a very stable commodity. And in the long term, it really is too soon to tell whether Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are going to continue, they're going to fall, or be successful. Certainly, electronic money is coming. There will be electronic money coming from India next year, faster than anyone expected. Electronic money, I think, is different than cryptocurrency because as a sovereign currency that comes from a country, it's backed from whatever it is a country has to back its money with. And if you look behind most of the cryptocurrency, they are backed by imagination, and imagination with a financial multiple. So, and we know that the moving to Bitcoin has caused the El Salvador economy to crash. So the first country that tried to accept Bitcoin, after it did that, now it is having immense trouble meeting its international debt obligations and stuff like that. So I would say the jury is out on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency so far.
Any thoughts?
There was a time that
I think we need a lesson sometime on Bitcoin and that kind of currency. Just because I saw a short half-hour presentation. I think it was YouTube or the internet somewhere, and for about a half an hour, I understood it, and it didn't last. I'd be interested to hear more about Bitcoin and just how it works.
Well, you're going to have to go ahead, please.
No, that's my goal for 2022. At least try to get a little handle on what is this on Bitcoin and stuff.
Well, first you have to figure out what money is. And then you have to figure out what paper money is as opposed to, quote, hard money. And you have to understand those before you can understand Bitcoin. The way I kind of understand it is with money that can just be created by governments, and they print out pieces of paper or notes or something, that our money is actually, our main money is all imaginary, and cryptocurrency is more imaginary than our imaginary paper money.
NPR had a wonderful program on money being imaginary. It's just because, if the tribe agrees that shells are worth something, then as long as everybody agrees on that, you can trade the shells.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's funny.
The short that I watched, they actually had, they showed pictures of warehouses full of servers. And somehow or another, Bitcoin was involved in this. So it was more substantial than just imagination.
Uh-huh.
There was some basis for it. I could never quite understand it.
It's based on the blockchain, and that's the same thing that makes NFTs NF
NFTs,
non-fungible
tokens.
tokens. Yes, that's the same thing that makes NFTs valuable. But go back far enough, and this NPR thing said that money's only, I mean, it's a piece of paper.
Right.
No, you can burn it. You can, it can decompose in the compost. It's only because everybody agrees. And on that basis, you can say that all money is imaginary.
Right.
I mean,
And
gold, you can't eat gold.
it was a piece of paper. It was gold before that. And like you say, before that, it was shells or something like that. When my daughter was 6 or 7, I had sat her down and we talked about money, and we had this same conversation that we're having now. Anyway,
Are you calling us all 7-year-olds?
that's right. I foisted this off on a 7-year-old. That's right.
Yeah, but did you give her an allowance?
I think so.
That's the way to learn about money. Sorry, dear, you can't have the candy. You can use your allowance to buy
That's
some.
what, okay.
I recently read a book about carbon coins, and how this might be in the future a new currency that's
Right.
based on you earn these carbon coins by taking carbon out of the air.
Uh-huh.
And this sounded pretty interesting.
That would be a
This
good
is science
deal.
fiction.
That's right. If we
Okay.
would make the guys greedy for money have the effect of their greed be to clean the planet, that would be cool.
Maybe that's why it was science fiction.
The whole point.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it changed the world, by the way, in the book.
Of course.
Go ahead.
Richard, we're arguing whether Bitcoin is real. But now we know what robots really are, because they do laparoscopic surgery and they don't need any of us around. What's that?
Whoa. Those
That's true.
surgeons must be going crazy.
And so here they have at Johns Hopkins University, they have the smart tissue autonomous robot, and they have shown on a pig. These pigs get around for medical research, and this was on it did laparoscopic surgery on the soft tissue of a pig without a human hand. So it did it autonomously, and they have shown that they can automate one of the most intricate and delicate tasks in surgery, which is the reconnection of two ends of an intestine. And they found that their robot surgeon was able to produce significantly better results than humans doing the same process. This is very delicate surgery, and in it you're connecting two ends of an intestine, and it requires sutures that are done with high accuracy and high consistency. High accuracy and high consistency are not things that people actually are very good at, and so even the slightest hand trimmer or misplaced stitch can result in a leak that can have catastrophic complications. And the robot can do it better than humans, and it means that this kind of surgery can be safer and can be done in places where you don't have this expert surgeon who has a chance to specifically do this kind of suturing of soft tissue. And they have shown that this vision guided system connected to AI can do this kind of suture of soft tissue. And they have been upgrading the features, they've been making it more autonomous and improving the surgical precision. One of the things they have done that has been a big step up is they have a state-of-the-art imaging system, and they use these visual images. The other trick they did is, it turns out before this, soft tissue surgery was especially hard for robots because it's unpredictable. And for the robots to do it successfully, they have to be able to quickly adapt and handle the unexpected. Those are not good things for robots generally, but here this system has a novel control system that adjusts the surgical plan in real time. Basically, as you make every stitch, it's adjusting the plan, and that's just what a human surgeon could do. So this is the first robotic system to be able to plan, adapt, and execute a surgical plan without minimal human intervention. And they think this is going to make, in general, this kind of surgical task done better and safer than it is today.
Any thoughts?
Incredible.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine how that works.
But there is a misnomer, because we've talked about robotic surgery that's been used for years now, but that's under control
Right.
of the doctor.
Yes.
And this does not require the doctor's
It's
control.
autonomous
Yes.
and might even be even more tricky than a self-driving car. A self-stitching surgeon.
Well, Richard, I think maybe that's it for today. But thank you so much. And thanks everybody for participating, and we'll see you next week.
See you
Bye for
next.
now.
Good articles. Thanks.
Thanks, I did.
Adios.
Bye-bye.
Yes.